Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's take up the daily quiz for today. The first question: which of the following fundamental rights are available to both citizens and foreigners except for enemy aliens? Equality before the law and equal protection of laws, due process of law, right to reside or settle in any part of India. Amongst the given options, the third statement would be incorrect because this fundamental right guaranteed under Article 19 is available only to the citizens and not to foreigners. Whereas the other two fundamental rights guaranteed under Article 14 and Article 21 respectively, they would be available to both citizens and foreigners provided if they're not enemy aliens, meaning that they're not from an enemy state. So the correct answer would be option B, 1 and 2 only. This question has been taken up because of a related article in today's The Hindu newspaper. The Supreme Court was looking into a case which was seeking the release of Rohingya refugees who have been reportedly detained in India. And according to the litigant, the government of India is trying to deport these Rohingya refugees back to Myanmar. Considering the deteriorating human rights situation in Myanmar, the petitioner was requesting the Supreme Court to protect the Rohingya refugees in India. And in this case, the Supreme Court has refused to order the release of these detained Rohingyas. While looking into this case, the Supreme Court has observed that fundamental rights guaranteed under Article 14 and 21, that is, right to equality, which covers equality before law and equal protection of the law, along with due process of law under Article 21, they are available to all persons, be it citizens of the country or even to foreigners. Whereas the right not to be deported is ancillary to the right to reside or settle in any part of India under Article 19. And this fundamental right, guaranteed under Clause 1, Subclause E of Article 19, is available only to the citizens and not to foreigners. Hence, the Supreme Court has left the matter to the government to decide whether the Rohingyas should be deported back to Myanmar. But the Supreme Court has recognized the fundamental rights enjoyed by the refugees under Article 14 and 21, thus making them eligible for equal treatment of laws by the government and by the judiciary. And under Article 21, they are eligible for being treated as per the due process of law. See, the Indian Constitution guarantees a set of fundamental rights under Part 3, and they are covered under Article 14 to Article 32. Some of these fundamental rights are available to both citizens and foreigners, provided if the foreigner is not an enemy alien. Here, you can find those list of fundamental rights. Similarly, there are few fundamental rights that are available only to the citizens of the country. Now let's look at the second question. Which of the following statements are correct? African swine fever is caused by a virus. It predominantly affects animals such as domestic pigs. It is not known to cause disease in humans. It has been reported only in sub-Saharan Africa and exists in the wild through a cycle of infection between ticks and wild pigs. Amongst the given statements, the fourth statement is incorrect. So option C is the right answer. See, African swine fever is indeed caused by a virus that belongs to the Asparviridae family. This virus predominantly affects animals such as domestic pigs, and they are carried by several natural hosts such as ticks. These hosts, they act as the vector and they infect several wild and domesticated animals. But however, this disease is not known to affect human beings, and hence the first three statements are correct. The fourth statement is incorrect because African swine fever has been reported in other parts of the world as well. Yes, African swine fever is endemic to sub-Saharan Africa, but it has also been reported in Europe and Asia, including in India. This question was taken up because according to this article in The Hindu, an outbreak of African swine fever has been reported in Mizoram and it has already killed several domesticated pigs. Now let's look at the third question. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, was set up solely for rehabilitation and human development of refugees from Yemen, Palestine, Democratic Republic of Congo, Afghanistan. The correct answer is option B, Palestine. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency was set up in 1949 through a resolution of the UN General Assembly, and it was set up to solely provide relief to Palestinian refugees who had been displaced following the 1948 conflict between the Arab countries and Israel. This agency is largely dependent on voluntary contributions from UN member states for its funding, and large donor countries such as the United States have been critical for the functioning of this organization. This question has been taken up because, according to this article in The Hindu, Biden has restored aid to Palestinians by resuming the $235 million financial assistance that was being given to Palestinians. For several decades, the US has been supporting the Palestinian cause, especially their human development and rehabilitation, by funding the programs of US aid. Apart from that, the US was also a major contributor to the UN Relief and Works Agency, and all this funding had been unilaterally withdrawn by previous President Donald Trump, as he considered these institutions to be biased against Israel. Israel has often accused the UN Relief and Works Agency of anti-Semitism, and considering the closeness between the Trump administration and Israel, the US government had withdrawn all this funding that was directed towards relief work for the Palestinian refugees. But now, the Biden administration has reversed this decision of the US government and has fully restored aid to Palestinians, including the funding to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. Now let's look at the fourth question. Which of the following statements are incorrect? The Constitution does not specify the number of judges to the Supreme Court and has left the decision entirely to the government. Currently, the maximum possible strength of the Supreme Court is 34, including the Chief Justice of India. Amongst the given statements, the first statement is incorrect, so option A is the right answer. See, the Constitution under Article 124 does specify the number of judges to the Supreme Court. It states that the Supreme Court of India shall consist of a Chief Justice of India and not more than 7 other judges until the Parliament prescribes a larger number of judges by passing a suitable law. So this clearly makes the first statement in the question incorrect. So the Parliament, by passing a suitable law, can increase or decrease the number of judges to the Supreme Court. And until 2009, as per the provisions of the Supreme Court Number of Judges Act of 1956, the maximum number of judges in the Supreme Court was capped at 30 judges, excluding the Chief Justice of India. That is, the total strength of the Supreme Court was 31 as of 2019. But this has been increased to 34 as a result of the Supreme Court Number of Judges Amendment Bill of 2019. Through this amendment, the maximum number of judges has been increased to 34, and this includes the Chief Justice of India as well. So by excluding the Chief Justice of India, if you look at the strength of the Supreme Court, then the number stands at 33. So this makes the second statement correct, and hence option A is the correct answer, because the question is asking you to identify the incorrect statement. This question was taken up because, according to this article in The Hindu, the Supreme Court, headed by the Chief Justice of India, held a meeting to decide upon the remaining vacancies at the higher court. As of now, the judicial strength has reduced to 29 as compared to the approved strength of 34, including the Chief Justice of India. 4 more judges are set to retire this year, and hence the process of appointment has to be speeded up. But the government of India has been very slow in appointing judges to the Supreme Court based on the recommendations of the Supreme Court Collegium. Now let's look at the fifth question. Which of the following statements are correct? India has reported a double mutant strain of SARS coronavirus 2. B1617 is its formal scientific classification. Studies have shown reduced efficacy of vaccines against such mutants. All the 3 statements are correct. Option D is the right answer. See, according to this article in The Hindu, a new SARS coronavirus 2 variant has been detected in India, and it is a double mutant strain because it has displayed 2 specific mutations that have been labeled as E484Q and L425R. And this double mutation has enabled the coronavirus to become more infectious, and it can even successfully evade the antibodies being generated by our immune system. This double mutant strain found in India has been officially classified as B1617 strain, similar to how the unique strains of United Kingdom and South Africa were classified. The Indian SARS coronavirus genome group has shared this genomic data with GIS AID, which is a global initiative on sharing avian influenza data. Studies have shown that the double mutant strain found in India has become resistant to T cells, which are a part of our immune response against such infections. Then global studies have shown that vaccine efficacy can go down against such mutant strains, and this has emerged as a matter of grave concern. Now let's take up a question from the 2017 prelims paper. Democracy's superior virtue lies in the fact that it calls into activity the intelligence and character of ordinary men and women, the methods for strengthening executive leadership, a superior individual with dynamism and vision, a band of dedicated party workers. Amongst the given options, the most appropriate answer would be option A. See, the very basic virtue of democracy lies in the power of the ordinary people. It is the ordinary men and women who decide upon their government through elections by casting their vote, and for this, their intelligence and character is called into question. Now, coming to the fact of the day, let's talk about the Clean Ganga Fund, which is in news as per this press release from the Ministry of Jal Shakti. The Ministry of Jal Shakti has informed that the Clean Ganga Fund has been playing an instrumental role in the conservation and rejuvenation of the Ganga River. This fund was set up in 2014 to fund the conservation and rejuvenation of the national river under the flagship program Namami Gange. The Namami Gange program is an integrated conservation mission which was launched in 2014 to effectively tackle the problem of pollution in the Ganga River and to conserve and rejuvenate the river. This flagship program of Ministry of Jal Shakti is being implemented by the National Mission for Clean Ganga. This national mission functions as the implementation wing of the National Ganga Council, which is headed by the Prime Minister himself. And this National Ganga Council was set up in 2016 to replace the National Ganga River Basin Authority. Under this flagship program, the Clean Ganga Fund has been set up primarily to attract voluntary private contributions from around the world, and it takes in donations from private individuals and as well as from organizations including public sector units and as well as private organizations and trusts. The objective of this fund is to promote the participation of people because the conservation, cleaning and rejuvenation of this river is a massive exercise and it requires the people to take ownership and provide the required assistance to the government institutions in executing this ambitious task. So this concludes our discussion for today. Thanks for watching.